Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our leadership series. This is the first of our 2024 financial year series where we're going to be covering some of the more interesting subjects that you guys as agency owners need to know. The two big topics that are going to be on the focus for the next 6 months. Obviously, data laws and what that means, and how do you guys prepare for that? So that's coming up in about 4 weeks. That's going to be landing, and then we're going to go through probably a 3-part series for that. And the second bit is psychosafety and the law changes with that. And this will be the first kind of step in the direction of that journey. The next presentation, we might have more around the actual fundamentals of what is the changes in the laws and what does that mean to you guys. We are blessed to have the company of Carolyn Hopelight joining us today, and she is our expert, and she's going to be talking to us about how to show up as a leader and what does that mean. I will hand over to her to take things over, and it should be about somewhere between a half an hour, 45-minute presentation, and possibly with some opportunities for some questions afterwards. Carolyn, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. Thanks for that generous introduction, and a big warm welcome to all of you who've showed up. It's bloody freezing, so I do appreciate that some of you may have blankies over your legs, but you're here nonetheless. So a big welcome to everyone. I thought it might be useful to give a little bit of context as to why Sam invited me here in the first place. So I like to say that the advertising and communication business fed and nurtured me right from, the baby steps of my career many moons ago. I'm not going to date myself by telling you exactly how many years. Let's just call it a very long career. I have loved this business from day one. I've lived and worked all over the world. I've worked in agencies that, let's just say, were full of mad, bad people, and I've worked in some amazing cultures. So it's hardly surprising that in the next chapter of my career, giving back to the industry that gave me so much was just naturally on my radar. So very thrilled to be sharing the fruits of my leadership knowledge with you. And, hopefully it poses some questions and gets you guys thinking differently about some common topics. I'll share a camera. Give me a moment. Let's make sure this is all happening. Can everyone see that okay? I can't see anyone anymore.
Yes,
so give me
yeah, looks good.
Awesome. Great. Okay. So yeah, what does showing up as a leader actually mean? Isn't leadership innate? Once you get the promotion, once you've got that top office, surely you should know what you're doing. In my experience, that's often not the case. So I'll demystify it on a few different levels. So in no particular rigid order, here are some of the things that I'll cover today. Authentic leadership. It's a bit of a buzzword. What does it actually mean when you unpack it? Mindset over matter. Now, this is a huge one because a lot of leadership is actually what goes on in the 6 inches between our ears. The stories we tell ourselves, the stories we tell others. So I'll help you debunk some of that monkey chatter too. Imposter syndrome. This one is particular to our industry. We're an industry that prizes youth and innovation. And I know from my own journey, I was in roles that probably were ahead of my own maturity at various junctures in my career. So how do we support that next generation of leaders who are super talented and have it all going on to actually settle into those leadership roles? Vision and goals, fundamental to leadership. I always have a bit of a chuckle because I know when we're talking to our clients, we're awesome at creating visions for them that inspire and mobilize and motivate. And yet when it comes to our own brands, our own businesses, and our own teams, sometimes we can suck a little at this. So how do we take the fruits of our wisdom and apply them to self? And then accountability. This is a huge topic. I often get asked, how do you set KPIs? It's all well and good to talk about these topics. How do you make sure people in your teams show up for them? So that's a little of what we'll cover today. It will be meaty for sure. Okay, starting at the beginning with authentic leadership. And there's a phrase about leadership that I really love, which is leadership is simple. It's not easy, but it is simple. And there are two key factors here that for me define what being a leader means. The first is actually show up as a leader, be the leader. You are in a position of leadership. You're not in a position of management anymore. And that requires educating yourself. You know, I'm a huge believer that leaders are made, not born. You have to want it, you have to study, and you have to show up for it. You know, even in the Roman era of thousands of years, there was only one Marcus Aurelius, and there was a Julius Caesar too. But we'll let that style of leadership fall to one side for now. You want me to talk about psychological safety in the workplace, Sam? So Julius Caesar probably isn't the best example. We'll go with Marcus Aurelius for now. So, you know, the first step is when you're in that position, what are you doing to feed and nurture how you show up as a leader? I'll talk a lot about extreme ownership in this presentation because people do what you do. They don't do what you say. So it all starts with you. People sometimes don't like to have this conversation. It is a truism. You set the tone right from the top and it spreads down. I'm a big believer in cultivating the expectation of leadership in your team. And what I mean by that is not just expect a lot of them, but actually expect the best of them. So in how you show up, your team will emulate that behavior. It's a bit like parenting, right? One of my big parenting epiphany moments, and I have two teenagers, just to put that in context, was to actually catch the kids being good. So rather than, you know, going on every time my big son walked in after rugby and left mud all over my stairs and traipsed it through to the bathroom, you know, rather than catching them doing everything wrong, focusing on the things they do right. And often we're in perfectionist, you know, environments where we're striving, but celebrating those little wins and actually consciously electing to see them in your team changes a culture. It's really significant. The second simple fact of leadership is show up as yourself. I almost put a picture that I use in presentations on the screen of me and my kids. This was, again, a huge breakthrough moment. And I see this in so many people I coach, where the at-home self and the at-work self suddenly become one and the same. And I want you to really take that in, because often there is a perception of how you're supposed to be as a leader that's actually discordant with how you are as a person. And the true leaders, and again, Brené Brown is the advocate for this with her vulnerability work, you know, the true leaders show up just as themselves. They own their flaws, they own their biases, they talk openly about their blind spots, and they create a culture where that's not seen as failure, and it's certainly not seen as a soft measure. It's seen as feedback. And what feedback does is it allows for constant improvement. So that's how I define authentic leadership. Imposter syndrome is actually linked to that, funnily enough, because imposter syndrome derives from a space of fear. And if you think back to some of your early days in leadership, or indeed think about the younger leaders in your team who are fantastic, and they bring that energy and they bring that, you know, never say die, optimism and just great ideas. Ultimately, they've never done this before. So it's very easy to start believing your own monkey chatter. And the monkey chatter are the, well, what if I didn't say that right? Or I'm not doing it the way that that boss that I so admired would have done it. It's false evidence appearing real. And this is an inner journey, right? We all have our own summits to scale per the image. So it's a little different for everyone. But ultimately, the biggest antidote to imposter syndrome is recognizing that being a leader is about standing in your own power, showing up as you authentically with no comparison to anyone else, and speaking your truth, not trying to be someone that you're not, right? And again, that coming together of home self and work self is really fundamental in this. I have two questions I ask clients who I believe are suffering from imposter syndrome. The first is, if you're in a meeting, you're thinking, oh God, did I just say the wrong thing, or did I really embarrass myself with that question? Ask yourself, why am I thinking about me? And what I mean by that is leadership at its core is about service to others. It has to be. It always has to be. How are you serving those in your care, and how are you serving your clients? And when you take it back to that fundamental, it's very quick to go, it's actually got nothing to do with me. You know, one of the things I say when people are talking about brands they're working on is always bring it back to the brand. That is where the conversation should center, not how am I showing up right now in this meeting? Are they thinking that I've been promoted 2 levels above where I should be? Stop thinking about yourself. Take it back to a place of service. Even saying the words, you know, I can see people calm down and go, well, I absolutely can talk about that brand. I absolutely can talk about, you know, a Ford motor vehicle or a can of Red Bull because I'm passionate about it and I've studied it. And it just eliminates the nerves. And the second question I say is, why am I talking? Ask yourself that. Why am I talking at all? You know, the notion that the true insight comes from silence is a really big one. And often I think there's a need, especially in younger leaders, to fill the space, to fill the gaps. And what I encourage is a lens of curiosity and a lens of reflection. So stop talking as much, really listen in, ask questions of clarification and questions of curiosity. And again, that will get you out of that imposter syndrome state of being. I wish I could see you because I have no idea if this is landing. Can someone give me a quick verbal, yes, all good, we've got you? And then I'll
Yes,
makes
you're getting
sense.
Absolutely
emojis.
loving it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, guys. I spoke earlier about vision. I spoke about goals. And this is one of my favorite personal development quotes. People without a purpose perish. The same is true for businesses, agencies, you know, without a vision and a clear and really powerful statement of vision or purpose. So this speech by JFK, you know, it's an oldie, but a goodie. They say when you're setting a purpose, don't think small. Purposes are not for pragmatists, they're for idealists. And we know this, right? This is the work we do for our clients. It's a case of the shoemaker's shoes always being broken. So set it in a way that when you are asking your team to work late or work weekends, or indeed when you're doing that, and we'll talk about work-life balance too, because that should be the rarity, not the norm, they want to be there. They're shooting for something bigger than the pitch deadline. They're actually shooting for something that at their very core elevates and lifts. And that's what a purpose does. So you've got to bring it to life, you know, have it pinned up all over the agency. Gail Kelly, the ex-CEO of Westpac, tells a great story in her book of when she took over as CEO, one of her first tasks was to rewrite Westpac's purpose and vision. And she used to, every day when she got in the lift, ask whoever was in the lift with her from, you know, day one of setting it and launching it, do you know Westpac's vision? And she said it was very depressing for a number of months because everyone sort of blankly looked at her and thought, she's the CEO, I better make something up. And then after about 3, 4, 5 months of really integrating that, making it part of the language, you know, actually embodying and living it through everything Westpac did, she started getting it played back to her, often in people's own words. And then at the end of that first year, suddenly people were getting in the lift and saying it word for word, and not just reciting it parrot-like, saying it from their core, from their depth. And that's what I mean by, you know, purpose can lift anything, absolutely anything. You have to pick a good one, and the language does matter. I'm going to read a bit of this. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard, because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies. and skills. That kind of language is what you want, right? It's rousing. And the other thing is, I know this gets a bit of a, woozy vision boarding overlay, but part of what visioning and writing stuff up does is it gives you the permission to act as if. And that is when vision starts coming to life as a leader, when you're acting as if you've already achieved it and all your action steps are driving towards it. That's when others will follow you. That's how Marcus Aurelius got those armies going into God-forsaken places and fighting armies, that were much wilder than they were. Comfort or freedom? Okay, we're in indie land here, so we've all had a bit of experience on that entrepreneurial pathway. And ultimately, why you become independent is for the freedom, right? But you have to make decisions along the way that feel pretty uncomfortable. You're not going to have both at the same time. And what I've observed in my journey owning, running agencies and, comparing that with multinational land is it never stops. It just changes in form. So different phases of your growth bring different comfort versus freedom conversations. They're ongoing. And once you accept that, it actually somehow becomes easier to navigate. Great quote here by Napoleon Bonaparte. I see only my objective. The obstacles must give way. There will not be any compromise. There will be no compromise. It will happen. And in this instance, bold decisions matter. That's why we're here, because we want the freedom of making bold decisions. And it's also about not getting caught in thinking small, that poverty mindset, paucity mindset, really facing head on any limiting beliefs that might stop you from behaving in those bold ways that lead to real growth. And again, here, if people often say to me, what if you've got someone in your leadership team and they're just not performing? And I always say, dig deeper, ask more questions, keep asking questions. Don't tell them what you think. Ask questions to peel back those layers of the onion. At the very least, you'll learn something. 100% I can guarantee you'll learn something you didn't know. And at worst, you'll have an epiphany moment coming from that person where they actually own their own role in creating the situation. So never stop asking questions as a leader. Often leaders think, well, no, I'm a leader, I'm expected to know everything. You're just expected to ask more questions. Well, that's what true leaders do. Okay, my pet topic, extreme ownership. I'm a huge believer that no one can do the work for you, especially when it comes to your own emotional state and how the actions you take are impacted by that. We were talking about psychological safety, as a topic for Sam to continue with over the series. And for me, sure, there are legislative changes coming, but it's almost a chicken and egg situation. Agencies that change how they behave because of legislative changes are actually doing it the wrong way around. You should do it because it's the right thing to do and it will lead to a thriving business. So, if you have cultural challenges afoot in your business, you have to look to yourself first. We cause our own cultures and the cultures of our businesses. So when you are prepared to say, how did I contribute to this situation as a leader? It's the antithesis of the name, blame, shame, finger pointing, or he did that and then that was the cause and effect. It's like, hold on, just take a step back. What role have I played in what's unfolded here? And then you take it from there. And the other thing is the passive aggressive, the subtle undermine, where no one's really taking accountability, but everyone's pointing fingers at everyone else around the table. That is not a safe culture. And it's actually not a culture that will have any longevity. People will burn out and people will leave. So as tough as this is, you have to look at yourself first and you have to figure out the practices that are just zero tolerance. Certainly in my coaching work, I see name, blame, shame as something that good leaders regard with zero tolerance because they lead to low energy. People are in fight-flight mode and you can't operate at your peak when you're in that space. This is another one. So it's very easy to look at what others are doing. And I'm a big believer that in order to truly succeed, you have to shape your own game. I'll tell you a little story. I worked for a very well-known agency brand, and we lost a very big pitch. And the first thing that was done was the head of strategic planning of the winning agency was poached. They were, given a lot of money and wooed to come over. And I remember sitting in the first meeting with this person who was very astute, and the managing director said, "Tell us everything that you did to win that pitch, because we want to do exactly the same thing here. We just want to copy and cut and paste what you did." And she looked at him quizzically and said, "Actually, all we did was tell the client what we really thought." And I remember there was just stunned silence in the room, because there was an expectation that, it could be cookie cutted and imported into that agency. And that wasn't the case, because truth always speaks louder than formats or strategy mechanisms. And that ultimately is what, it may not have been a good truth to hear, but the client responded, and that's why they won the pitch. She didn't last long in the agency, because what they thought they could copy was not copyable in that culture. Quite an interesting one. So I've pulled out two here. I mean, these are oldies but goodies too. True innovators do shape their own game. Thomas Edison, I think most people know this story. If you don't, 10,000 attempts, failed attempts, before he cracked the light bulb. Lesser men and women would have given up long before that and run away screaming, but not Thomas Edison. He had a purpose. He wanted to illuminate the world and create this new way of living and being, and that deep inner passion is what drove him. And Henry Ford, I mean, he did a few things. He changed production and affordability in the motor industry forever, but I particularly like the V8 cylinder, which he had engineers for 2 years telling him it is impossible. It cannot be done. You cannot cast it in one piece. It is impossible. Just give up, let Chevy take over. We are done. And he would not hear it. I think he drove a few engineers completely batty, but he got his V8 cast as one. And ultimately that led to the next iteration of the Ford legacy. So we know this, right? If you're a leader and you're expecting unicorns and roses, you're in the wrong role. Things will get tough. And, a lot of this is about self-care. It is actually about making sure that whatever practices work for you, you're conscious of those and you actually make those known. Again, people do what you do, not what you say. So if you're chained to your desk every weekend, and the last time you were at your kid's school was 3 years ago, you got a problem. It starts with you. You got to borrow that belief, and that's where coming back to that vision is so important. It's got to motivate you. It's got to feel like more than words on a page. It's got to feel like something worth getting up for in the morning. Again, this is a path of education. So whatever it is for you, reading, podcasts, meditation, yoga, it doesn't matter. The point is, pick something and really commit to it. It's important to us to show up healthy and functional as leaders and play up or fail forward. So, I'm a huge believer in mentors or coaches. Don't make failure a negative thing. Make it something that the agency can learn from. And I know we're all nodding going, this is very obvious, but we've all worked in businesses where chairs get thrown and yelling happens. It's unfortunately potentially still a factor in this business. Maybe the chairs don't get thrown anymore, but voices do get raised. And you can't move forward. You can't evolve in a culture where failure is not learned from. I'm not saying it's accepted, but not necessarily left where it is. It's unpacked, it's learned from, and the lessons are taken forward. And fall back in love with the business. This is such a great industry. Oh my gosh, we get to do the coolest things. We get to create, we get to innovate, we get to think differently about things. You know, we get to play with cool, awesome brands. Get yourself a ticket to the Cannes Festival next year. Create something that's, you know, remotivating for you. Watch some great ads. Look at some award-winning FE campaigns. Whatever it is, fall back in love with the business. You'll find your focus. Okay, consistency. So as entrepreneurs, it can get grueling, right? And one of the things that I learned is just keep going. Just keep going. Do as much as you can do, as fast as you can do it. So that we go to the moon speech, okay? He said by the end of the decade, but the amount of things that went wrong in the lead up to that, I mean, there were tens of thousands of things that did not go according to plan. And yet that fail forward and play up attitude meant that they were all solved as they happened. So it may not happen in the time frame that you envisage, but so long as you have that clear vision of the end point, you're more likely to get there. Do as much as you can do, as fast as you can do it. And remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So it doesn't mean you change the goal. It doesn't mean you change the vision. It just means you may set your goal in stone and your timings in sand around it. And ultimately that will get you to that end point. So that lighthouse analogy, it's part of my personal branding. I'm called the lighthouse, and I just love the lighthouse. My name's Light, of course. It's such a humble thing, right? It's perched on some of the most perilous parts of the planet. It's always happy, it shines its light. Thunderstorms, rain, doesn't matter. It's always happy to be there. It's being of service to others. It's lighting that path. You know, if that's how you're running your business, and it's also illuminating. So it's doing something that has a creative element to it too. New business. I always get asked about leadership in new business. And for me, this is about knowing who you want, being really crystal clear. I've worked in too many agencies where it was like, we'll pretty much take anyone who'll pay us. So, you know, no judgment on that. If you'll pay the bills, you're in. It's about being very conscious in that attraction power. I'm a big believer that new business is all about the law of attraction and intentionality, and a big believer that you attract the energy you are in. Again, I worked for an independent many years ago, which I'm fondly remembering smiling. And when I was lured back to multinational land, this particular independent was well known for being new business aces. They asked me, you know, how were they so good at new business? What did they do that made them distinctive? And I said, when they were on in a room, they were like a symphony. They were in complete flow. It was effortless. There was humor. There was charisma. Yes, there was smarts, but they were just completely infectious. So that energy of being infectious and seeming like you're almost not really trying. I mean, you rehearsed, you've taken the action steps. That to me is what attracts your like in turn. So another thing as well, words are so powerful. I still hear this around the agency traps too much. You know, the beep beep client did beep beep this, you know, none of that. Just make that a non-negotiable as well. It's an energy thing. The clients know when you're bad mouthing them, and so do your new business prospects. So yeah, watch that one as a cultural nuance. I've talked to this a little. I'm a mind body wellness advocate, so this will keep coming up. You've got to find your stillness. And there's that great quote from Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our power and our freedom. And that is what we're looking for as leaders. We're looking to be that bastion of calm when the chaos is going on around us, to be that person that others go, if we take it to that person, they will know what to do, and they're not going to yell and scream, and they're not going to throw chairs. That's a metaphorical example, by the way, although it did actually happen to me many years ago. You want to be gracious. Find your grace. And remember, if you freak out, you're going to create a culture where others freak out every time something goes wrong. Because, recurring theme, people do what we do, not what we say. So make sure that you are cultivating that emotional balance in your own leadership. Okay, this is another one. Life happens, stuff happens, legislation changes, pandemics happen. Life is unpredictable, and all of that is external. And leadership is very much, again, about going in. That locus of control has to come from within. So it is actually about doing the personal work yourself. If you're trying to create a culture of better work-life balance, and you're overworked and stressed out, well, that's a choice you're making. And in making it, you're creating a culture where no matter what you say, people will draw their habits from you. So taking small steps is important. I was reading a book about, it's a great book, actually. It's on my recommended reading list at the end of this, by Dr. Tara Swart. And she was talking about coaching a senior executive in the banking world in London who was in her 40s, grossly unhealthy, was suffering from adult onset diabetes. I mean, every health issue you can imagine that this woman had. And it was a case of, if you don't do something, you're probably going to drop dead of a heart attack, was the doctor's diagnosis. And she decided to walk halfway to work. So she'd catch the tube to a particular point and then walk the rest of the distance into her office, which wasn't very far, but it was pretty much all she could manage. And so it went, so she would get off at an earlier tube station and so again, and ultimately she ended up changing her whole life just as a result of taking some small steps. So think about what you're doing with food, exercise. What are you doing to fuel your life? And this is where getting a coach is so important. Sometimes we really do need that third witness perspective. So a couple of other things, small things with your team. If someone is stressed, fearful, and full of anxiety, these practices work. Okay, again, they're not woo-woo, they actually work. Acknowledge 3 things they're doing right. Give gratitude for 3 things they're doing right, because that will overshadow the fear and anxiety. What you want is that synchronized orchestra, that team that just, it's effortless, right? Everyone knows what the other one is doing and it just works in great harmony. And how you get that is by acknowledging the things that are going well. You want to get out of that fight, flight, war zone. And yeah, you want to allow the law of attraction to kick in between your team and with your clients. So we've talked to this a little, all well and good to have this written down, but it's about taking purposeful action. So what are you going to do to lead by example? Actually write down your own non-negotiables. So a good exercise is to say, in a work environment where I wasn't a leader, what would be a non-negotiable for me? And what would be the things that would inspire me and light me up to work there? Start like that, start as a hypothetical, and then do the analysis of, okay, well, of those 3 non-negotiables, is my business actually portraying those or not? You can get some external perspective on that too, because sometimes it's hard to know it when you're in it. Don't let yourself off the hook. Again, if you have to own the potential role that you may be playing in that, and write a contract with yourself. Actually put it in writing. Make it almost like a legal agreement that you might have with a client. Write it with yourself and then extend that to your team. There's nothing like clarity to actually inform behavior, and set those expectations high. So accountability, I'm a big believer in this, and we are commercial enterprises. We're not pure artists. It's art, science, and results at the end of the day. And again, like anything, even if you've failed on the result, it's more around the dialogue as to why, and getting to that early rather than letting it linger. I'm a big believer that doing this quarterly or annually is way too late. These should be at least weekly thoughts and conversations. They don't have to be big formal meetings, but again, catch them being good. I go with a 3-to-1 ratio. 3 things they're doing well, because there will be things that everyone is doing well, and then the one element to build on. Make it constant. Make that a state of flow in your business. It doesn't really matter what structure you use. You don't have to use a structure. It's more committing to feedback. So SMART's one, smart, measurable, actionable. I can't remember the rest of the acronym. Stop, start, continue is a good one, and green, red, amber, the light system. Those are pretty well known. This is another thing as well linked to that is you got to know your numbers and understand your profit centers. And you're probably all nodding going, yeah, we do. I'm amazed when I talk to leadership teams one level down from the CFO or the MD and CEO, how little they actually understand how their businesses make money. And this is important because it will inform certain practices that they may be very committed to, that freak out the senior leaders because they cost money. So that again is a dialogue. Share that with your team. In the olden days of advertising, as opposed to this wonderful new golden era, not many people actually really understood the numbers. And I think that's a great leap forward that we've taken. Okay, so everything I've learned about leadership, I have educated myself on, and I've been very fortunate to work with people who along the way have referred some great resources to me. So, they talk about, I think in the Sunday Times, the 5 books that changed my life. I couldn't even get to 5. There's 6 here. They are all great. The first one is the glorious Penny Ferguson's The Living Leader. Just absolutely ace. And she talks a lot about that home self and work self and the reconciliation. Tara Swart is a psychologist and a medical doctor who found her source, and the source in this instance refers to the brain. She was raised in a Hindu culture, and she managed to pull it all together into a really compelling read. A classic Power versus Force. Again, this is experimentation quantified over 30 years around energy, verbiage, how we respond to certain words. Words are powerful, use them wisely. I am South African, so for me to have an all black book on here, you got to know how good this one is. Talking about radical candor, how to pull teams together. Legacy is an absolute must read about the All Blacks journey. Extreme ownership, very American, very US Navy, but some real wisdom in that around how you are showing up as a leader and the spillover effects that is having. And then Napoleon Hill. I think this book is now 90 years old. It's still fantastic. What we think about, we bring about. Henry Ford said similar. So that's it by way of formal presentation. I think I've rolled in with a hot 3 minutes to spare. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions in the chat. Anyone?
And sometimes there are no questions in there.
I have one.
Oh, yes, Angela, go.
I absolutely loved your session. I think it just kind of reconfirms what we're doing right and some areas that we can focus on. I love your focus on vulnerability and authentic leadership. I'm a massive advocate of that as well. And I think your comment around leaders being here to serve and support others and it's not about us is just so important. I think the more that we can all think like this, the better our culture, but more importantly, the better for our team. It helps them thrive. I have one question around imposter syndrome. I am absolutely a recipient of that. What do you have any comment around whether there's a healthy dose of imposter syndrome or whether you think it's just bad altogether?
I think imposter syndrome, because it derives from fear, ultimately leads to burnout. So yeah, it's never healthy. You got to remember, fear and ego are 2 sides of the same coin. So you often have imposter syndrome manifesting through commentary from others in your leadership team as, he's an egotistical bastard, excuse the bluntness, and actually what's going on is that person is showing up as egotistical, but they're actually terrified.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can be quite tricky to, unpack that when you, for example, in the work I do one-on-one with people in that space, because it's false bravado that can also play out. So either people just freeze, it's fight, freeze, or they overcompensate by becoming bolshy, and both are not great for a leader to manage. That's not creating that synchronistic symphony. Make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. Thank you. But I loved it. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Angela. That's great.
Anyone else? And no. So we can connect everyone after the meeting. Carolyn, how can people get in contact with you if they want to engage you moving forward?
Great question, Sam. Probably on LinkedIn would be the best. So you can find me under Caroline Hope on LinkedIn. And how about we make some details available when we release the session through YouTube? I believe it's going out on the IMAA's YouTube channel. Really appreciate everyone being with me, and appreciate you guys, Sam, and your wonderful team for pulling this all together.
Oh, no, absolute pleasure. Really sage words. On behalf of everyone, thank you so much for your time and sharing that with us. That was absolutely fantastic. Once we have the recording, we'll share it on the closed LinkedIn group and also within the newsletter, also Carolyn's details as well, if everyone wants to get in contact with her. Thank you so much again. Thank you, leaders. Great talking to everyone, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you.